with paper bags at one time. We've since evolved to, it's sometimes hard to remember, then it was paper bags, then plastic bags, then paper bags with handles. Now people are bringing in their own. There will be something else. You may not know what it is now, but there will be something else that will come along. So you have to be looking at the packaging business and see what else is happening, not necessarily for replacing paper or plastic bags, but generally what's happening, because that could give clues to it. We looked at the plastics business for obvious reasons because of the plastic bags. At the petroleum market, because plastic bags are made from petroleum, and we know about the volatile costs of petrochemicals, and so they impact the cost of the plastic bags. And finally, we looked at the environmental arena, because there are a lot of consumers who are very concerned about the biodegradability of plastics in the environment. The plastics business did a terrible job at informing the public, educating the public. One of my corporate jobs many moons ago was with a company called American Maize Products Company, and they made all kinds of products where corn was used as a basis for it. And this is more than 30 years ago. They were actually making plastic out of corn, not plastic. They were making packaging out of corn, so it degraded. And there were plastic bags that were being used that were made out of corn 10 years ago, but nobody ever talked about it. So when you used a plastic bag, you had no idea if it was petroleum-based or corn-based or anything else. So the product did exist. Just like if there's some candies that are sold that you can eat it, with the wrapping, totally. So having this information on these other 5 industries gave them a much more accurate and comprehensive view of what was happening in their industry, besides just looking at the market for frames, if they had only looked at the frame market. And there was a bonus. And the bonus was they were able to use this information for their strategic planning and their marketing plans, because they knew so much more of what was happening. So this is not a cost to a company, and it's really not even an investment. It's really a way to grow your company with a very minimal fee associated with it, because so few businesses do it. So I would ask you to consider, for either your companies or your clients, is to challenge them to think about what changes have happened in the industry and outside the industry over the last 1, 2, 3 years that have impacted them. And it can't be a generic answer, which is what most people give. They say, oh, it's the economy, everything, we're responsible for the economy. It can't be the economy or technology or weather. It has to be something very specific to their industry. And so we live in a world in which people we all acknowledge, oh, there's so much change going on, so many changes, but they can't identify it for themselves. That's a disconnect. You can't say there's change every place else, but not here. And so we have to try to really dig down and think about what are those changes and how can I use them to advantage. It's not even to best a competitor, it's to satisfy your customers, to keep up with your customers. So your homework, again for either your company or your clients, is to think about 3 to 5 other kinds of areas that are impacting your business. And then it's always good if you can bring outside people together to think about your business, because they will identify things that are going on externally to your industry that you never even thought about. And very often that's that aha moment. Oh yeah, of course. I don't know why I never considered them. So you have to sometimes have help of other people to think about what other industries there are. And then try to go back and do it every few months, because now you're in the mindset of thinking about what else is going on that could be important. So I want to talk just for a few minutes about competitors. As you're saying that so often companies look at, well, if they're doing that, we got to know what they're doing so we can do it also. Companies don't succeed because they beat their competitors. You are successful because customers are buying from you. And this is true whether it's B2B, B2C, nonprofit, educational. Over the next week, when you buy anything at all, think about how much are you thinking about the competition. There are sometimes you might think about it. When you're buying a car, you might think about a few other brands. You're not going to think about the 600 other models of cars that are out there. You might think about a few. But generally, when we buy something, we're looking for what satisfies us. We don't care about the competitor, unless you have a special relationship with that company or with the people or something. But overall, I want you to just consider over the next week when you're buying anything, how important are competitors? And they're not nearly as important as we think they are. So let me give you just an example of that. Several years ago, when a lot of newspapers were going out of business, there were two newspapers in Denver, the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post. Well, the Rocky Mountain News went out of business, and nobody was surprised because a lot of newspapers were going out of business. Well, nobody's reading them anymore. Several months later, 6 months later, there was a publishing conference. The publisher of the Rocky Mountain News gave a presentation about why they went out of business. And it wasn't for the reasons that most people think. I mean, there's never any one reason. It's also always a multiplicity of reasons. But what happened in this particular case was, as the publisher explained it, this was in the early days of getting alerts and flash information about news breaking and all of that. And with the Rocky Mountain News, when they would get wind of something that was happening, they were fearful of putting it up on their website because they thought the Denver Post would steal it and put it on their website. So they held back putting it on their website. The Denver Post would publish it, and then people would think that the Denver Post was getting the news before the Rocky Mountain News. Rocky Mountain News was more concerned with their competitor than they were with their customers. And that is not unusual. Companies get fixated on their competitors. And they very often are not even aware of competitors that are from other industries that are what I call substitute or alternative competitors. So now we have competitors from all different industries that are going after our customers. It's not just people in the industry. That's a whole other topic we'll save for another time. The point is, in business, it's not a zero-sum game where I win and you lose. It's not like the World Series where the Cubs won and the Indians lost, as it is in sports or in war. There are places where it is a zero-sum game. In business, that's not the way it is. There is room for many, 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 many competitors, companies in every single industry. I mean, think about it from 2008 when we had the financial crisis and all the restaurants that there were. Many went out of business, but so many new restaurants started. Now, did we really need another restaurant in Los Angeles? Don't we have enough restaurants? And yet, restaurants were opening every single day. They weren't worried about the competition. They said, we have something we think customers want. So we're trying to urge you to think about the fact that you have to know what the competition is doing, but it's much more important to understand the entire marketplace of what's happening. So look at all these other areas and say, which applies to me and what do I know about them? And is there something happening that's an opportunity or is it a potential threat? And when you give customers what they want, they'll buy from you. So I just love this cartoon that I saw that these two companies are going against each other selling lemonade, but then this other one comes up with hard lemonade. He wasn't worried about the competition. So the point is that think about what do your customers want. Well, let me give you an example. Cosmopolitan magazine is sold worldwide. And what happened is that it's sold in the UK, as it is in many other countries, is that it's very often sold at newsstands, much more so than in the United States because people walk a lot more. And so at the newsstand owners, we're very often hearing that mostly women were buying this. We're complaining that if it was raining or something that it wouldn't fit in their bag, it was too big. So they would have to have another bag, a plastic bag or something else to put it in, and it was annoying. They didn't always have it. So they would just comment to the newsstand owner. Enough of those comments got passed up the chain. And people at Cosmo heard about that, so they decided to do a test market. They came out with a magazine that was exactly the same. Everything that's in this magazine is in this one. It's identical. All the same articles, the same layout, the same features. The only thing that's different is the font size, okay? And since most of their customers are under 40, that wasn't an issue. So they offered these two magazines. Now, when their competitor, Glamour magazine, saw this, they just laughed uproariously. They thought this was the silliest thing they had ever heard. They started calling this a pygmy magazine, and they made lots of fun of it. 4 months later, Cosmopolitan magazine, selling both sizes, was #1 in its genre. It hadn't been before, but now it was #1. Now what happened is that people who were buying the other magazines, Elle or Glamour or other fashion magazines, or even other ones, this isn't even a fashion magazine, but others, they were moving from the magazine they wanted to the one that was more convenient. So Cosmopolitan's goal was not to go after their competition, but it was to satisfy their customers. And several months later, Glamour came out with their own pygmy magazine. And a few years ago, when I was in Japan, I noticed when we were using the subway in Tokyo that they have kiosks with magazines. And a lot of them had the small size magazines. So I don't know how prevalent it is, but the point is they were focusing on customers more than competitors. Chris Martin of the band Coldplay told the story on 60 Minutes. And he said that when he's performing in an arena of tens of thousands of people, he can't see the people because of the lights. He can only see the exit signs. And when he's performing a song and he sees people moving in front of the exit signs, he knows he hasn't chosen the right playlist, because nobody gets up when they're playing a song you love. So there are many ways to find out what your customers want. They indicated in a lot of different ways. He wasn't concerned with what other bands and groups are doing. He was more concerned with his own fans who were coming. I'm going to go ahead just because of the time. So the point is that we live in times that are changing in all kinds of crazy ways. And it's not just the presidential election. We tend to think that's what it is now, but it's really so many other things. This year, in February of 2016, Playboy changed their policy, and they are no longer having nudes in the magazine. February was their first non-nude issue. Ad pages were up 55%, and now they're selling in 1,200 more newsstands than before because they don't have to keep it in the back or covered up in some other way. Who would have thought that Playboy would do better without nudes than with nudes, that maybe people really are reading it for the articles? Who knows?
Hef's daughter came up with that.
Playboy has articles?
And even the Pope is unprecedented in so many ways, what he has said about gays. And he also said that, you know, what women should do if they're concerned several months ago with the Zika virus, about using birth control for it. And so he's constantly coming out with ideas that are so much more liberal and open-minded than anyone ever knew. Totally unprecedented. That is the world we live in. And in an unprecedented world, that's where the opportunities are, because most companies don't recognize them or see them. So we really have to reframe our thinking. And so many companies think, I've got this great product or service, we're going to be successful. You need a great product or service, but that's the price of entry, that's not enough. They think their strategy is fabulous. That's very important also, got to have a great strategy. You have to have distribution in place, and the financials have to be there, and you have to have cash in the bank. You need all of these things. And pricing sometimes helps, but it usually is not the thing that will work for more than 1 quarter or something. You need something more, and that's what companies are missing, and that is connecting with customers. And to do that, you really have to understand what's going on. And so I call that having the right information or the right input. So what does that mean? It means that the information has to be current. It has to be accurate. It has to be relevant. We constantly are surrounded by information that dances around what we're interested in, but it's not specific and on target. It has to be objective and it has to be sufficient. So let me give you an example of how Will Smith, the actor, used a lot of these concepts when he became the world's highest paying actor in the 90s. Now, he never used the term market intelligence or competitive intelligence. This is what he did. It has all the elements of what a good, smart business does. Now, if you remember, he made his mark first as a rapper, and then he became the hottest television star with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. After 6 or 7 years, when he was at his peak, he decided he wanted to go into films. And he wanted to be the highest grossing actor. So he and his business manager sat down and came up with a strategy. And that strategy involved information. How are we going to go